So this actually comes from CNN, which is interesting. I don't need that. This comes from CNN. It says the sitcom killed off its villain. Now the show can go anywhere. It kind of reminded me of Avengers Endgame. You had Infinity War, which was amazing. And there was actually loss. Avengers lost. They lost a lot. And then you had Endgame. I don't want to spoil it for you, but if you hadn't seen it by now, you might want to go check it out because I'm fixing to spoil it. So in Endgame, time travel becomes a thing. They can just undo anything that they did and undo anything they lost and win everything. And the stakes weren't the same. They did beat the villain, but it didn't feel the same. You know what I'm saying? And they could go anywhere. And now when you look at all the Marvel stuff that came after Endgame, I know I've got my criticism in the comments when I talked about some of these other things coming out, but I mean, there ain't been nothing like everything prior to Endgame. I feel like we built up to Endgame with the big bad with Thanos, and then he's gone. And so is Marvel. It's never been able to recover. I think Guardians of the Galaxy that came out was the closest thing to a success, other than Spider-Man, which is the Sony Marvel. So the Sony, the Spider-Man one with all the 3 Spider-Men, of course, that was a huge hit. I think Guardians was big. Deadpool and Wolverine's coming out soon. I think that's going to be a really, really big hit. I don't think it's going to be maybe $1 billion big necessarily, but I think it's going to be big. I'm going to go check it out. I like all that. But that's what this kind of made me think of when I heard this. So now they're like, okay, now all bets are off. We don't have to follow our storyline anymore. We don't have to follow our timeline. We can move on. Not only that, but I remember watching Rick and Morty when it first came out. I was like, oh, I can watch this at night, and it's something stupid. I can just put on like South Park or Family Guy or whatever and just kind of drift off into sleep. Rick and Morty, as stupid, silly, cartoony as it was, it's actually a very smart show. Like, I really got engaged into it. One of the, I was instantly a fan. I got hooked on it. Dan Harmon, who is one of the creators of it, he's one of the creators of it. He's got a story structure circle that he created. That's phenomenal. I use it now in all of my writings. Anytime I write a script, I use it. It talks about what happens at what point in the story. A quarter of the way through, a tenth of the way through, and you can almost time every episode of Rick and Morty to that will. And it's awesome. It's awesome. It's a great, great tool. And there's one episode, and I've referenced this before, and I'll come back here. There's an episode of Rick and Morty that I think is absolutely phenomenal. And it sounds, I'm going to describe it. It's going to sound really silly to you. Okay. You're going to be like, what are you talking about? But there's a deeper context there, almost prophetic in a way, in my opinion. Okay. Hear me out. And I don't know if this is exactly what they meant. So there's an episode where one alien entity takes over all these people's bodies. It's called Unity, right? Is it Unity? I think it's Unity. And so all these people are being controlled by this one person, this one unity, or entity or something, is all of the people, all these different people. But they used to be their own individual people, right? Later in the episode, Morty and his sister are waking them up and making them become themselves again. And then you had some people that were like, this guy was a pedophile and this guy was a murderer and that guy is whatever. Now, on this planet that they're on, everyone looks the exact same, right? They're all blue or whatever it is. The first thing that happens when they get woken back up, the very first thing they do is they find something to divide themselves amongst, a tool to be divisive among themselves. So let me back up a little bit here. So we talk all the time about like racism in this country or anti-LGBTQ or what. Look, we're always going to find something to divide us. We just are, and when I say we, I don't mean us or intentionally going out there and just being dicks. right? And say, oh, you're black. I don't want, no. There's always going to be differences. I mean, on a form, it says, are you African American? Are you white? Are you non-Hispanic? I mean, there's always going to be stuff like that, which some of it's necessary and some of it isn't necessary. But there's always going to be something that makes us unique and different, and it's going to be divisive. Someone is going to use it to be divisive. So back to the show, all these people that are like blue or whatever look exactly the same. This dude rips off his shirt and he says, rise of the square nipples or whatever. And he's got like square nipples, and somebody else has pointy nipples, and somebody else maybe has like starfish shaped nipples or something like that. It is the stupidest thing, but it's exactly how we act as humans. You know, if everybody had babies, everybody mixed together and had babies, and there was no different races. You had Indian with black, white with, you know, Asian, and eventually it all mixed together and everybody looked the exact same. We would still find something to bicker about, something to divide us. And that was something that was very, very powerful from that episode. That's what I got out of it. So it's not, let's get rid of our differences. Our differences are fine. It's, let's learn how to work with each other with our differences. Let's learn how to cohabitate and exist and love each other because or despite our differences. You know, that's really the lesson that I think we as a society still haven't learned yet. We often want to get rid of our differences, and that's just, well, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So anyways, that was my little spiel from Rick and Morty that I really enjoyed. I really did like that episode, and I thought it was very applicable to a lot of situations in the real world. So anyways, we'll read through this from a little bit. And this is a really long article. I'm not going to read it all. I'll just read some of the headlining areas here. So it says, after 10 years on the air, Rick and Morty, the animated sci-fi comedy about a misanthropic scientist and his 14-year-old grandson's interdimensional travel adventures, is surprising as ever. In its 7 seasons, it has steered its characters through apocalypse, divorces, an alien musical reality TV competition, and school dances, events with equally gravity in its off-kilter universe. There are very few rules in Rick and Morty, which makes the job all the more fun for its writers, who are working on its 8th and 9th seasons now. But in the middle of the 7th season, which ended in December, Rick and Morty made its most shocking move yet. So I guess spoilers. I may have already ruined that. Sorry. It finally gave Rick what he spent more than half of his 70-odd years seeking. Rick finally killed his mortal enemy, Rick Prime, in the 5th episode of the show's recent 10-episode season. Rick Prime, a cruel version of Rick from another dimension, killed our Rick's wife, throwing his life off course. Our protagonist's curdled, single-minded pursuit of vengeance eventually led him to rejoin his family, recruit his daughter's best teenage children for his interdimensional travels, and set the series in motion. But true to Rick and Morty's deeply cynical tone, Rick feels nothing when he kills Rick Prime in a series of increasingly brutal punches. Afterwards, back at his family home, while Morty rejoices in Rick's victory, Rick is as numb as a zombie. The act of killing his enemy, Rick realizes, was ultimately meaningless and does nothing to ease the loss of his wife. It takes him a few episodes to shake his despair. There's a story in there too, a moral story and all that too, if you look deep enough. And I do like Rick and Morty. I do hate that they let what's his name, Justin Roiland. I think that talks about that in here too. Yeah, let me just read this and I'll come back to it. Rick made major strides in season 7 with one major setback. As in previous seasons, Rick and Morty's 7 seasons was profane, uproariously funny, and often deeply upsetting. Rick and Morty is the property of Warner Brothers Discovery, the parent company of CNN. No wonder why CNN's covered it. That's right. I forgot about that. It was the first to air. Season 7 was the first to air after Justin Roiland, who co-created the series with Dan Harmon and voiced both title characters, was fired due to allegations of sexual assault. but his departure didn't kneecap the series. New actors Ian were brought in to voice Rick and Morty respectively, and the show continues to probe the mysteries of life in outlandish scenarios, asking questions like, would you stage an intervention for your alcoholic friend whose wife left him for the predator? And also, what if Hugh Jackman was there? So yeah, so that was what I was going to say is we've seen this happen so many times. People are being fired for allegations. I don't know where Justin Roiland stands right now on things. I haven't followed it that closely. I mean, he was the co-creator of the series. He did both voices. He's done voices for other shows, and he was fired for allegations. Who else was it? Just Chris. God, he was in House of a Thousand Corpses. He had the show Singled Out. I can't think of his name. I know it was Chris Hardwick, I think was his name. He had allegations against him and he was fired. And then those allegations, I want to say, were proven to not be true. Well, he was already out of a job and his reputation was completely soiled. Justin Roiland may be a piece of crap and may have done everything he's being alleged to have done. He may be a completely innocent dude. We will probably never hear about it, but we have heard that he got fired and all the allegations and everything. So his reputation is ruined, whether he did it or not, and he's lost his job, a job from a show that he co-created. I mean, that is a bummer right there. You know what I mean? Just a bummer. So I did hate to hear that, and I haven't watched Rick and Morty probably the last 2 years or so. I want to say I was watching it on one platform and then they quit carrying it. Then it moved to another one and I didn't have that one or something. I don't remember. But I've seen, most of the early stuff. I have not seen any of the new ones without Justin doing the voices. So, I don't know how that's going. I want to say I've heard some people say that the voices were pretty good, but they could use some polishing it up. And I get that. Sure, I get that. But I do like the show. I just wanted to call that out because, one, I just want to mention it again because of how silly to me it is to fire somebody with those kind of allegations if there's nothing more to back them. And then what it did by killing the villain. I don't think Rick and Morty really stuck to like any kind of set rules anyway. And I don't know if this did anything for a show, but they made it a big announcement on CNN, of course, because I mean, it's like the only other thing besides Trump they ever talk about, it seems like. But yeah, it's kind of like the cuffs are off to do even more stuff that they wanted to do. But I feel like sometimes those restrictions, the restriction of this is your goal, this is your purpose, this is where you're heading. I think a lot of times, while it does limit you in what you can and can't do or should or shouldn't do, it often streamlines your storytelling and your focus. And again, I'm just a small time filmmaker guy. I'm not big deal, but I think that helps guide the path. Like everything we saw in Marvel building up to Endgame had that drive and that purpose. And then after that, it's kind of like, well, there's a bad guy and there's a bad guy, but there's not a main villain. And we've lost all of our main guy. It just got completely off course. In my humble yet accurate opinion. I have seen some of the stuff after Endgame. Not really loving anything, honestly. But again, that's Disney for you. They've kind of screwed over Star Wars and now Marvel. But, hey, Deadpool, Wolverine, it's coming out. We'll see what they do.
Hey guys, thanks for checking out this clip from the Morning Mayhem. Remember, this is just a portion of the full show that comes out every Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. If you hadn't already, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on any of the full shows or these tasty little nuggets.